I spent 18 years believing I was nobody. A clerical error. A girl surrendered to the system by people who couldn't be bothered to remember my name. The fluorescent lights at the Department of Social Services had a specific hum, a low drone that burrowed into the base of my skull and stayed there. It was the sound of waiting, the sound of being a case number instead of a person. But kneeling on the dusty floorboards of a stranger's attic 3 weeks later, surrounded by 247 letters that had been returned to sender year after year, I understood how completely I had been wrong about everything. The envelope in my hand was dated September 15th, 2016, my 10th birthday. The handwriting was elegant, looped in blue fountain pen ink that had faded to a soft gray. The stamp showed a cardinal perched on a snow-covered branch. The red address stamp screamed across the front in all capitals. Return to sender. Addressee unknown. Inside, a $10 bill slipped out and fluttered to the floor. The letter was short. Dear Nora, happy 10th birthday, our beautiful girl. Your grandmother planted extra lavender this year. Purple, like the dress you wore in the last photo we have of you. We look for you in every young face in town. When the school bus goes by, your grandfather stops working just to watch, hoping today might be the day. We've never stopped searching. We never will. Please write to us if they let you. All our love, Grandma Grace and Grandpa Thomas. My hand shook so violently I nearly tore the paper. They had written me. Not once, not twice. 247 times across 16 years, every birthday and Christmas, sometimes more. And every single letter had come back to this house unopened because the system had lost me somewhere in the shuffle between foster homes, and I had never known they were trying. The grief hit like a physical blow. I doubled over, forehead pressed against the rough wood, and the sound that came out of me wasn't quite crying. It was something raw, something that had been locked behind my ribs for so long it hurt coming out. They had wanted me. All along while I was sleeping in group homes with bars on the windows and foster houses where the refrigerator had a padlock. Someone had been writing my name with love. Someone had been planting lavender and watching for school buses and refusing to give up. And I had never known. 3 weeks earlier, I had walked out of that building into what I thought was freedom and found it tasted like nothing at all. The caseworker didn't look up from the file folder. Her glasses slid down the bridge of her nose as she flipped pages with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had done this exact task 1,000 times before. She was new, maybe my 6th in 3 years. She didn't know that I went by Nora instead of the full name on my birth certificate. She didn't know anything about me except what the manila folder told her. And it didn't tell her much. Just one more signature here, Nora. The pen felt greasy between my fingers. I scratched my name on the dotted line, watching the cheap ballpoint skip and leave gaps in the letters. Nora Rose Hayes. The ink was drying out. It felt appropriate. My entire history in the system had been written with dying pens, broken records, and people who couldn't quite remember which file belonged to which kid. All right, you're all set. The state's obligation ends effective immediately. Do you have a place to stay tonight? The shelter on 4th has beds if you get there before 5. I'm fine. I have a plan. The lie came out smooth because I had been practicing lies since I was 10 years old. Lies about why I had bruises. Lies about whether I was hungry. Lies about having homework when really I just wanted to stay in my room and avoid whichever foster parent was drunk that week. This lie was easier than most because she didn't care enough to question it. I pushed through the heavy glass doors into June's sunlight that felt too bright, too warm, too indifferent. Portland stretched out in every direction, concrete and exhaust, and the sour smell of garbage from the alley behind the building. Freedom was supposed to feel like triumph. It felt like falling. My entire life fit into a canvas duffel bag the color of moss. 3 t-shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, underwear, a broken-spined sketchbook I had stolen from a group home when I was 15, and a toothbrush in a plastic baggie. I had $287 in cash tucked into my sock, money I had earned working under-the-table construction cleanup jobs. It wouldn't last a week. I was 18 years old as of yesterday. I was legally an adult. I was completely alone. Nora Hayes. The voice came from my left and my entire body tensed before I could stop it. Shoulders up, weight shifting back, hand tightening on the duffel strap. It was reflex. In my world, when strangers knew your name, it was never good news. A man in a gray wool suit leaned against a black sedan parked in the loading zone. The suit looked well-tailored, but not expensive, and he wore it like someone who had to wear suits for work but didn't particularly enjoy it. He was maybe 48, with silver threading through dark hair and deep lines around tired eyes. Who's asking? My name is Harrison Cole. I'm a probate attorney. I've been trying to locate you for 6 months. He held out a business card with both hands, a gesture that felt oddly formal. The card was simple, cream-colored cardstock with black lettering. Harrison Cole, Esquire, Estate Planning and Probate Law. A Portland address. I didn't take the card. I stared at his hand until he lowered it. I don't need a lawyer. I haven't done anything. If this is about the incident at the group home last year, that was settled. I'm not here because you're in trouble, Nora. His voice dropped half a register, softening in a way that made my skin crawl because it sounded like pity. I'm here because your grandmother passed away in November of 2022. You're the sole heir to her estate. I laughed. It was a harsh sound that made a woman walking her dog across the street flinch and pull the leash tighter. You've got the wrong person. I don't have a grandmother. I don't have anyone. I was a surrender. No family history. That's what it says in the file. Harrison Cole looked at me with something in his eyes that I couldn't quite name. It wasn't pity, exactly. It was heavier than that. You had a grandmother, Nora, Grace Hayes, and a grandfather, Thomas Hayes. They owned a farm in Montana, 45 acres near a town called Ridgeview. Your grandfather passed in November of 2020. Your grandmother lived another 2 years after that. The property is yours now. The house, the land, everything in it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a key ring. 3 keys hung from it, 2 large brass ones tarnished with age, and a smaller silver key that caught the afternoon light. He held them out, and the metal glinted dully. The world tilted slightly sideways. My stomach dropped like I had missed a step going downstairs in the dark. If I had family, where were they? The words came out sharper than I meant them to, edged with something close to rage. Where were they when I was 10 years old, hiding in a closet because my foster father was drunk and looking for someone to hit? Where were they when I was 15, sleeping in a park because I got kicked out of placement for fighting back? Where were they for 18 goddamn years? Harrison Cole's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. His hand stayed steady, keys extended. I don't have those answers, Nora. I only know what the legal documents tell me. The property is in Ridgeview, Montana. It's called Lavender Ridge Farm. There's no mortgage, no liens. It's yours, free and clear. I stared at the keys. Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell. Part of me wanted to throw them in the gutter and walk away. If these people had existed, if they had known about me, and they had done nothing while I spent 18 years being bounced between strangers who saw me as a paycheck, then I wanted nothing from them now. But I looked at the keys and thought about the $287 in my sock
and the fact that it wouldn't even cover a security deposit for an apartment in Portland. If I sell it, how much is it worth? Harrison hesitated. He glanced away, down the street, before meeting my eyes again. The market out there isn't strong. The house needs work. It's been empty for almost 2 years, but the land itself has value.
45 acres, mostly open. You could probably get 150 to 200,000, depending on the buyer. I took the keys. They were heavy and cold against my palm. Good. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to sell every inch of it and never look back. The Greyhound bus smelled like stale disinfectant and old sandwiches wrapped in plastic. I bought the cheapest ticket they had, a route that would take me from Portland to Helena, Montana, with transfers in 3 different cities. It cost $83 and would take 2.5 days. I sat by the window and watched the city dissolve. First, the downtown buildings gave way to strip malls and car dealerships, then suburban neighborhoods with identical houses and manicured lawns, then industrial zones with warehouses and storage facilities behind chain-link fences, then nothing but road and sky. The sky kept getting bigger the farther east we went. In Portland, the sky was a narrow strip of gray between buildings, something you mostly forgot about unless it was raining. Out here, driving through eastern Oregon and into Idaho, the sky opened up like a dome that crushed everything beneath it. It made me feel small in a way I wasn't used to. In the city, I was invisible because there were too many people to see. Out here, I was invisible because the landscape swallowed me whole. I tried to sleep, but my mind kept churning. It pulled up memories I had worked hard to bury. Foster home number 3. I was 9 years old. The foster mother locked the pantry with a combination padlock because she said foster kids were thieves. I got so hungry I tried to pick the lock with a paperclip. She caught me and made me stand in the corner for 6 hours. When my caseworker came for a visit the next week, I didn't say anything because I knew what happened to kids who complained. They got moved, and the next place was never better. Group home number 2. I was 13. A girl 3 years older than me cornered me in the bathroom and told me if I didn't give her my new sneakers, she would make sure I never slept safely again. I gave her the sneakers. I slept in my clothes with my backpack as a pillow for the next 8 months, until they moved me again. Foster home number 7. I was 16. The foster mom was kind. She baked cookies on Sundays and asked about my day and made me feel like maybe I had finally landed somewhere that could be stable. Then she got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer and died 3 months later. I got transferred to a group home the day after her funeral because her husband couldn't handle taking care of foster kids alone. I pressed my forehead against the window and watched Montana scroll past. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still dusted with snow even though it was June. The landscape shifted from flat farmland to rolling hills dotted with cattle. We passed through towns so small they barely qualified as towns at all. A gas station, a post office, a diner, and then nothing for another 50 miles. The bus dropped me in Helena just after dawn on the 3rd day. My back ached from sleeping upright, and my mouth tasted like metal. I had $37 left after buying food at rest stops. I found a truck stop near the bus station and asked around until I found a driver heading toward Ridgeview. He was hauling lumber and didn't ask questions when I offered him $20 for a ride. We drove for an hour without speaking, the cab filled with country music playing low on the radio. When he dropped me at a gravel service road marked by a rotting wooden post, he pointed a thumb toward the rising slope. "That's the Hayes place up that way, about a mile in. Nobody's been up that road in a long time." I shouldered my duffel bag and started walking. The gravel crunched loud under my boots. The air here was different, thinner and sharper, and it hurt my lungs in a way that felt almost good. As I crested the hill, the smell hit me. It wasn't the smell of manure or hay or any of the things I expected from a farm. It was sweet and herbal and wild, like something from a soap store, but earthier and more alive. It hung thick in the air and made something twist in my chest, a feeling I couldn't name. Lavender. Acres of it, or what had once been acres. The fields were overgrown now, choked with tall grass and weeds, but the lavender was fighting to survive. Purple and gray-green plants swayed in the wind like a sea frozen mid-wave. The house sat in the middle of it all, 2 stories of white paint peeling to reveal gray, weathered wood beneath. A wraparound porch sagged on the left side like a broken wing. The roof was missing shingles in patches that looked like gaps in teeth. Windows with yellowed lace curtains stared out at the fields like blind eyes. It was a wreck. My heart sank. I had hoped for something I could flip quickly, something a developer might want. This place looked like it would cost more to repair than it was worth. I walked up the porch steps and the wood groaned under my weight. I pulled out the brass key Harrison had given me and slid it into the lock. It stuck. I had to jiggle it, sweat prickling my back in the June heat, until finally the mechanism gave with a loud clack. I put my shoulder against the door and shoved. The door swung open with a shriek of rusted hinges, and I stepped into silence. The air inside was thick with dust and the faint smell of lavender and old wood. Dust motes swirled in shafts of sunlight cutting through the lace curtains. I dropped my duffel bag on the floor, and it kicked up a small cloud of gray powder. The house was fully furnished. That was the first thing that struck me. It didn't look abandoned. It looked like the people who lived here had simply stepped out for a moment and never came back. A coat rack by the door held a man's plaid flannel jacket and a woman's wool shawl. A pair of muddy work boots sat on a rubber mat, the dried mud crumbling with age. In the kitchen, a calendar on the wall was turned to November 2022. A coffee mug sat in the sink with a dark ring of dried liquid at the bottom. I moved through the rooms like a thief. The living room had a floral sofa with crocheted doilies on the armrests. A violin hung on the wall in a glass case. Photographs lined the mantel above a stone fireplace. I picked one up. An older couple, maybe in their 60s, standing in front of what looked like this same house. The man was tall and lean, with silver hair and kind eyes. The woman was shorter, with steel gray hair pulled back in a bun and a face that was weathered but smiling. Between them stood a teenage girl, maybe 15 or 16, with long blonde hair and a bright, unguarded smile. I looked closer at the woman. Something about the shape of her face, the set of her eyes, made my breath catch. I pulled out my phone and turned on the camera, switching it to selfie mode. I held the photograph next to my face and compared. The same chin, the same slight upturn at the corners of the eyes, the same narrow nose. She looked like me, or I looked like her. For 18 years, I had never known where I came from, had never seen my own features reflected in another person's face. And here she was, frozen in a photograph, looking back at me with my own eyes. My chest tightened, and something hot pressed behind my eyes, but I refused to let it fall. I set the photograph back on the mantel with hands that shook. The kitchen was small, painted yellow that had faded to the color of old cream. The cupboards held mismatched dishes, and a few cans of food so old the labels had started to peel. The refrigerator had been unplugged and stood empty and dark. In a drawer, I found silverware that was stainless steel, not silver. Just another confirmation that these people had been poor. A door off the kitchen led to a small bedroom on the first floor. The bed was made with a quilt in shades of blue and green.
A bookshelf held paperbacks with cracked spines and a collection of ceramic horses. On the dresser sat a framed photograph. I picked it up and felt the world tilt again. The girl from the earlier photo, a few years older now, maybe 19 or 20. She stood in front of a lavender field with the sun setting behind her, turning everything golden. She wore cut-off jeans and a white tank top, and her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. But it was her smile that stopped me cold. It was radiant and unguarded, and so full of hope it hurt to look at.
A sticky note was attached to the bottom of the frame. The handwriting was different from the elegant script I would later find in the attic, shakier and more angular. It said, "Lily, summer 2006, 1 month before everything changed." Lily, the name on my birth certificate. Mother, Lily Ann Hayes. I set the photo down carefully and backed out of the room. My hands were shaking and my pulse hammered in my throat. I needed air. I needed to think. But my feet carried me toward the narrow staircase instead. The second floor had 3 bedrooms and a bathroom with old tile and a clawfoot tub. The master bedroom had a double bed with a faded blue quilt. On the nightstand was a pair of reading glasses and a water-stained paperback novel. In the closet I found men's work shirts and women's dresses, all decades out of fashion. The second bedroom looked like it had belonged to a child once, but it had been converted to storage. Boxes were stacked against the walls. Old furniture covered in sheets. The third bedroom was smaller, clearly an attic bedroom tucked under the eaves. The ceiling sloped down on both sides, and a small dormer window looked out over the lavender fields. The heat up here was stifling. It had to be 90 degrees, the air thick and still. I almost turned back, but something caught my eye. In the corner, under the window, sat a steamer trunk. It was better quality than anything else in the house, heavy leather with brass fittings that had tarnished to green. I dragged it into the light, the metal scraping against old floorboards. The latches popped open easily. Inside, the trunk was filled with paper. Journals first, dozens of them, leather-bound books with dates written on the covers in careful script. I pulled out the one on top. The date read June through December 2006, the year I was born. I opened to the first page and began to read. June 12th. The heat broke today, but Thomas is worried about the lower field. The drought is taking everything. We're down to our last $800. If the bank doesn't extend the loan, we'll lose the farm by fall. I don't know how to tell him I'm more worried about Lily. She's been withdrawn for weeks, won't talk to us, barely eats. Something is wrong, and she won't say what. I flipped ahead. July 4th. Lily came to us today, and I knew before she said a word. A mother knows. She's 6 months along. She won't say who the father is, only that he's gone. My beautiful girl. She's only 16, and she's so scared. Thomas wants to find the boy, but Lily says there's no point. I don't understand what that means, but I can't push her. She's fragile as glass right now. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely turn the pages. August 16th. Tragedy struck this house today. Marcus Brennan, the seasonal hand from the Jacobson farm, was killed in an accident with the thresher. He was only 19. Lily hasn't stopped screaming since Anna came to tell us. She won't eat, won't sleep, just sits and stares at nothing. Oh God, she loved him. I didn't know. She never said his name, but I understand now. The baby is his, and he's gone. August 20th. The doctor says Lily is suffering from severe depression. He used words like trauma and psychosis. She can't hold a conversation. She won't acknowledge the pregnancy. When we mention the baby, she becomes hysterical. We're terrified of what will happen when the baby comes. How can she care for a child when she can barely care for herself? September 15th. Nora Rose Hayes was born at 3:47 this morning. She's perfect. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. She has Thomas's chin and my eyes, and a full head of blonde hair like Lily. But Lily won't hold her. She screams if we bring the baby near her. The nurse says this level of postpartum depression is dangerous. She says Lily is a danger to herself and possibly to the baby. We're out of our depth. We don't know what to do. I had to stop reading. My vision was blurring, and my chest felt like someone had wrapped a band around it and was pulling it tighter with every breath. I skipped ahead, looking for the entry I knew was coming. October 1st. The social worker came again today, Mrs. Patterson. She looked at our empty cupboards. She looked at Thomas's chronic cough that won't go away. She looked at my arthritis that's gotten so bad I can barely hold the baby anymore. She looked at the foreclosure notice on the kitchen table. And she looked at Lily, who hasn't bathed in 5 days, who won't speak, who screams at the sound of the baby crying. Mrs. Patterson gave us a choice. Surrender Nora to temporary foster care where she'll be fed and warm and safe, or wait for them to take her by force when the bank evicts us next month. What kind of choice is that? What kind of choice is that? October 14th. We held our granddaughter for the last time today. Lily sang to her. It was the first time she's sung in 2 months. She sang that old lullaby about lavender, lavender's blue dilly-dilly. We told ourselves this is love. This is giving Nora the chance we can't give her. But it feels like we're tearing off our own limbs. It feels like dying. I closed the journal and sat there in the suffocating heat of the attic, trying to breathe. They hadn't thrown me away. They hadn't abandoned me because they didn't want me. They had been desperate and broken and terrified, and they had made a choice they thought would save my life. But I needed to know the rest. I needed to know why they never came back. I dug deeper into the trunk. Beneath the journals were stacks of envelopes bound with rubber bands that had degraded and snapped when I touched them. The envelopes scattered across the bottom of the trunk. All of them were addressed to Nora Hayes, care of Oregon Department of Human Services, Portland. All of them had been stamped in red. Return to sender, addressee unknown. I pulled one out at random. A birthday card with a cartoon puppy on the front. Inside, a letter. Dear Nora, happy 7th birthday, sweetheart. We planted 12 new lavender bushes this year, one for each year you've been away from us. We don't know if you're getting these letters. We don't even know if you're still in Oregon. But we have to believe that somehow, someday, you'll know we never forgot you. We think about you every single day. Your grandfather still stands at the end of the driveway every evening, watching for cars, hoping you'll come home. Please know you are loved. Please know we're waiting. Love always, Grandma Grace and Grandpa Thomas. I started pulling letters out faster. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, Valentines, letters written on lined notebook paper. All of them returned. All of them unread by anyone except the Postal Service. There were so many. I started counting them, stacking them in piles by year. 2007, 2008, 2009. When I finished counting, the number made my stomach turn. 247 letters, spanning from the year I turned 1 to the year 2022, when Grace must have died. For 16 years they had written to me, every birthday, every Christmas, sometimes just because. And the system had returned every single one because somewhere in the shuffle of moving me between 8 different foster homes,
Someone had failed to update my address. Or maybe they had updated it, but used the wrong format. Or maybe the letters had sat in a mailroom somewhere and no one had bothered to match them to my case number. It didn't matter why. What mattered was that for 16 years, 2 people had loved me and tried to reach me, and I had never known they existed.
I pulled out another letter at random. This one was dated January 2019. I would have been 12, living in group home number 3, sleeping with a knife under my pillow because the older kids like to steal from the younger ones. Dearest Nora, your grandmother isn't well. The doctor says it's her heart. The medicine is expensive, and we're struggling to keep up with the bills. But she made me promise to keep writing, even if she can't. She made me promise to tell you that you are wanted, that you are loved, that we've never stopped looking for you. We hired another lawyer last year. He filed a petition for visitation rights, but the judge denied it because we're too old now, too poor, too broken. They said you're thriving in foster care. We hope that's true. We hope you're happy and safe and loved. But we'll never stop trying to bring you home. Never. All our love, Grandpa Thomas. The thriving part broke something in me. I had been thriving the way a weed thrives in a crack in concrete, by being tough enough to survive, but never growing the way I was meant to. I sat there surrounded by 247 pieces of evidence that I had been wanted, and I finally let myself cry. Not the careful, silent crying I had learned in foster homes where showing weakness meant becoming a target. Real crying. The kind that shook my whole body and made sounds I didn't recognize. They had loved me. My whole life, while I was hating them for abandoning me, they had loved me. And they had died not knowing if I had ever forgiven them. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light coming through the window to shift from gold to orange to deep amber. Long enough for my eyes to swell and my throat to go raw. The sound of a car engine brought me back. I stood on shaking legs and crossed to the window. Down below, a black Mercedes sedan was pulling up the gravel driveway, expensive and out of place against the backdrop of the rundown farmhouse. The car stopped and a man got out. He was in his early 50s, wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than I had ever owned in my entire life. Charcoal gray with sharp tailoring that screamed money. His hair was silver at the temples and swept back in a way that looked calculated. He moved with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. He looked up at the house, and even from the second floor I could see the expression on his face. It wasn't friendly. It was the look of someone who had come to take something and didn't expect resistance. I wiped my face with the back of my hand and headed for the stairs. By the time I reached the front door, he was already on the porch. He didn't knock. He simply stood there, hands in his pockets, looking at the peeling paint and sagging boards with an expression that might have been contempt. I opened the door. "Miss Hayes, I presume." His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone used to getting what he wanted through charm or intimidation, whichever worked faster. "Who are you?" "Victor Brennan. I own Brennan Mining and Development. I've been in negotiations to purchase this property for the better part of 15 years. I don't remember agreeing to any negotiations." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your grandparents were the ones I was negotiating with. Unfortunately, they were stubborn. I'm hoping you'll be more reasonable." "I'm not selling." The words came out before I had fully decided to say them. Part of me knew I should at least hear his offer. Part of me knew I needed the money. But something about the way he stood there, so certain he would get what he wanted, made me want to slam the door in his face. His smile thinned. You haven't even heard my offer. I don't need to. This is my home now. I'm not interested. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He held it out, and when I didn't take it, he let it flutter to the porch floor between us. That's a geological survey completed last year. This land sits on top of a lithium deposit worth approximately $50 million. I'm prepared to offer you $200,000 for the property. That's more than generous considering the house is practically condemned. I looked down at the paper but didn't pick it up. If it's worth $50 million, why would you only offer $200,000? Because you don't have the resources to extract it yourself. You don't have the permits, the equipment, the expertise, or the capital. I do. $200,000 is more money than you've ever seen. It's a good offer. Get off my property. His expression hardened. You're making a mistake. Your grandparents made the same mistake. Look where it got them. There was something in the way he said it, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. What does that mean? He smiled again, cold and sharp. It means accidents happen, especially to people who refuse to be reasonable. You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, my offer decreases significantly, and you'll find that fighting me is expensive, very expensive. He turned and walked back to his car, unhurried, confident. The Mercedes purred to life and backed down the driveway in a cloud of dust. I stood on the porch watching until the car disappeared from view. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I looked down at the geological survey still lying on the porch floor. I picked it up and unfolded it. Technical jargon and charts I didn't understand, but the conclusion was clear enough. High-concentration lithium deposit, commercially viable for extraction. $50 million under the ground I was standing on. And Victor Brennan had been trying to buy it for 15 years. Long enough to have known my grandparents. Long enough to have been negotiating with them when they were still alive. I thought about the journal entry. The lawyer filing petitions that got denied because they were too old, too poor. The medical bills for grandmother's heart medicine. The foreclosure notices. How hard had Victor Brennan been pushing? How much pressure had he applied to two elderly people who were already struggling? I folded the paper and went back inside. The sun was setting, painting the lavender fields in shades of purple and gold. It should have been beautiful. But all I could think about was the 247 letters upstairs, and the man who had just threatened me on my own front porch. I didn't know what I was going to do yet. I didn't know if I was staying or selling or something else entirely. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I wasn't going to let Victor Brennan win. I woke to the sound of tires crunching on gravel. The dawn light filtered through the attic window in shades of pearl gray, and I lay there for a moment not remembering where I was. Then everything came crashing back. The letters, the journals, Victor Brennan standing on the porch with his threats wrapped in expensive tailoring. I had fallen asleep on the floor of the attic sometime after midnight, surrounded by evidence of a love I had never known existed. My back screamed in protest as I pushed myself up. Every muscle felt stiff, and my eyes were swollen from crying. The vehicle outside came to a stop. I moved to the window and looked down to see an old Ford pickup truck the color of faded denim. The driver's side door opened, and a woman climbed out with the careful deliberation of someone whose joints didn't work as well as they used to. She was maybe 70, with steel gray hair pulled back in a practical bun and a face weathered by decades of Montana sun. She wore denim overalls over a flannel shirt and moved with the kind of no-nonsense efficiency that suggested she had been working farms her whole life. In her hands, she carried a covered casserole dish wrapped in a checkered towel. I should have been more cautious.
I should have waited to see what you wanted. But something about the way she walked up those porch steps, steady and purposeful, made me feel less like I needed to hide. By the time I got downstairs, she was already knocking. 3 sharp raps that echoed through the empty house. I opened the door. She looked me up and down with eyes that missed nothing.
The wrinkled clothes I had slept in. The tear-stained face I hadn't washed. The defensive hunch of my shoulders. "You the one who inherited this place?" Her voice had the texture of sandpaper, rough from decades of cigarettes or dust, or both. "I am. Who are you?" "Anna Jacobson. I live 2 miles that way." She jerked her chin toward the west. "Brought you some food, chicken and potatoes. Figure you probably haven't eaten since you got here." She pushed past me into the house without waiting for an invitation, carrying the casserole like it gave her diplomatic immunity. She set it on the kitchen counter and turned to face me, hands on her hips. "You look like hell." "Thanks. Not an insult, just an observation. When did you eat last?" I couldn't remember. The bus stations blurred together, and I had been too nauseous with anxiety to eat much anyway. "Yesterday, I think." Anna pulled back the towel from the casserole. Steam rose from the dish, carrying the smell of roasted chicken and herbs. My stomach contracted so hard it hurt. "Sit down, I'll get you a plate." "I don't need your charity." The words came out sharper than I intended, but Anna didn't even flinch. "Didn't say you did. Said I brought you food. You can eat it or not, but standing there being stubborn on an empty stomach is just foolish." She found a plate in the cupboard and spooned out a generous portion. She set it in front of me along with the fork she had wiped clean on the towel. I sat. I ate. The food was simple but good, the kind of cooking that came from practice rather than recipes. I ate 3 bites and then realized I was starving and ate the rest so fast I barely tasted it. Anna poured herself a glass of water from the tap and sat down across from me. She watched me eat with the kind of steady gaze that made me feel like I was being assessed and measured. "You have Grace's eyes. And her chin. I'd know you anywhere." My fork stopped halfway to my mouth. "You knew my grandmother?" It wasn't a question, but Anna answered anyway. "Knew both of them. Thomas and Grace were my neighbors for 43 years. I was there the day Lily was born. Delivered her right in the bedroom downstairs because the midwife didn't make it in time. I sat with Grace every day the last 2 years after Thomas died. I'm the one who found her when she passed. And I'm the one who drove your mother to the hospital the night she died." The fork clattered against the plate. I set it down carefully, trying to keep my hands from shaking. "My mother died in a hospital." Anna's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy but was too tired to fully commit. "Car accident. January 10th, 2009. Black ice on Route 12 near the bridge. She was coming home from her shift at the diner in town. Vehicle slid off the road and hit a tree. She was alive when I got there, but barely. I called the ambulance and rode with her. She died 2 hours later at Regional Medical." The numbers didn't make sense at first. Then they did, and my entire chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. January 10th, 2009. I would have been just over 2 years old. How old was she? 20. Just turned it the month before. Anna reached across the table and pushed the plate toward me. "Eat the rest. You look like you're about to fall over." I picked up the fork, but my hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. The journal entries stopped in October of 2006. I didn't know what happened after they gave me up. Anna's mouth pressed into a thin line. "What happened is your mother spent 3 years trying to claw her way back to you. Soon as she turned 18, she got a job at the diner.
then picked up a second job cleaning offices at night. She was saving every penny to hire a lawyer and file for reunification. She had a whole plan mapped out.
Notebook full of budgets and timelines and everything she needed to prove she could take care of you. Something hot and sharp twisted in my chest. Did she ever get close? Anna nodded slowly. She was 2 weeks away, had the money saved, had the lawyer lined up. She was going to file the petition that Monday. Then the accident happened, and all that planning didn't matter anymore. 2 weeks. My mother had been 2 weeks away from filing to get me back when she died. If the roads had been dry that night, if she had left work 5 minutes earlier or later, if any single thing had been different, I might have grown up here instead of in the system. The grief felt like drowning. Where was I when she died? Foster home in Salem. Your second placement. You were just over 2 years old. When Lily passed, the state notified Thomas and Grace, but by then they were both in their 70s and struggling. Grace's arthritis was so bad she could barely hold a coffee cup. Thomas had a heart condition. They tried to petition for custody, but the state said no. Too old, too poor, no stable income. House didn't meet safety standards for a toddler. So I just stayed in the system. Anna's jaw tightened. They tried for years, hired lawyers they couldn't afford, filed petitions that got denied. Grace called the Department of Human Services every year on your birthday asking if there was any way to get visitation rights. They told her the same thing every time. Case closed. No legal standing. Move on. But she never did move on. Anna stood and walked to the window, looking out over the lavender fields. Grace planted 12 new lavender bushes every year, one for each year you were gone. She said when you finally came home, you'd see how long she'd been waiting. Thomas stood at the end of that driveway every evening from 5 to 6, just watching the road. Every single day for 14 years until the COVID took him in 2020. He'd stand there in the rain, the snow, 100-degree heat. Didn't matter. Grace would call him for dinner and he'd say 5 more minutes. What if today's the day she comes home? I put my head in my hands. The weight of all that waiting, all that hope deferred year after year felt unbearable. Why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't the system tell me I had grandparents looking for me? You ever try to navigate a bureaucracy that doesn't want to be navigated? Anna turned back to face me. Your case file probably got shuffled between caseworkers every time you moved placements. Information gets lost, addresses don't get updated, and nobody cares enough to chase it down because you're just another case number and they've got 300 other case numbers to worry about. She walked back to the table and sat down. There's more you need to know. More that Grace wanted to make sure you understood if you ever found your way here. But I'm not the one who should tell you. She left something for you. In the attic. Boxes with tape on them. The ones she told me never to open because they were only for you. I had seen those boxes, pushed against the far wall, sealed with layer after layer of yellowing packing tape. What's in them? Everything. The whole story. But you need to prepare yourself because some of it is going to hurt worse than what you already know. Anna stood and picked up the empty casserole dish. I'll be back tomorrow to check on you. In the meantime, there's a man you should know about. Victor Brennan. He came by here yesterday asking if I'd seen anyone at the house. I told him to mind his own business, but he's persistent. I know. He was here last night. Threatened me. Anna's expression went hard as granite. That's his way. Been trying to buy this land for 15 years. Thomas and Grace refused every offer. Now he thinks he can bully you into selling because you're young and alone. He mentioned something about accidents happening to stubborn people. Anna's hands tightened on the casserole dish. 3 farmers in this county refused to sell their land to Brennan Mining in the last 8 years. All 3 died in accidents: barn fire, tractor rollover, fall from a hayloft. Sheriff ruled them all accidental, but folks around here know better. We just can't prove it. The kitchen suddenly felt very cold, despite the June heat. You're saying he kills people who won't sell to him? I'm saying you should be very careful. And you should know that Marcus Brennan, the boy who was your father, was Victor's younger brother. Victor's been carrying a grudge since the day Marcus died. Blamed your grandparents for letting it happen on their watch, even though Marcus was working the Jacobson farm when the accident occurred. Some people hold on to anger like it's all they've got. She moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. If you find anything in those boxes that looks like evidence of wrongdoing, don't take it to the local police. Sheriff Thompson has been in Victor's pocket for years. You'll want to call the FBI field office in Helena, and my son Wyatt will be by this afternoon to help board up that barn. Structure's not safe as it is. She left before I could ask anything else. I watched through the window as she climbed into her truck and drove away, dust rising behind her tires. I went back upstairs to the attic. The sealed boxes sat exactly where I had seen them the night before. 3 large moving boxes with Nora written on the sides in black marker. The tape holding them shut looked like it had been applied in multiple layers over the years, some yellowed and brittle, some newer. I found a knife in the kitchen and used it to saw through the tape on the first box. Inside were more journals. These ones were smaller, spiral-bound notebooks rather than leather journals. The handwriting was different too. Younger, more hurried, with letters that slanted sharply to the right. I pulled out the one on top. The cover had a sticker of a sunflower and the name Lily Hayes written in purple gel pen. I opened to the first page. May 1st, 2006. Met a boy today. His name is Marcus, and he's working at the Jacobson farm for the summer. He's 19, from Billings, saving money for art school. He has the kindest eyes I've ever seen. We sat by the creek, and he drew pictures of the lavender fields. He drew one of me, too. Made me look prettier than I am. I think I'm in love. And I know it's stupid because I'm only 16. But I don't care. I flipped forward, watching the entries chronicle a summer romance between 2 kids who thought they had all the time in the world. June 3rd. Marcus asked if I wanted to go to the county fair next week. I said yes. Mom saw us talking and she smiled. I think she likes him. He's polite to Grandma and Grandpa, and he works hard. Grandpa said Marcus has good character. I'm so happy I could burst. June 28th. I'm pregnant. I took 3 tests and they all say the same thing. I'm terrified. I told Marcus this afternoon and he cried. Happy tears, he said. He loves me. He wants to marry me. We have a plan. We'll move to Billings after I turn 17. He'll get a job and I'll finish school online. We can make this work. I know we can. August 10th. Tomorrow we're telling my grandparents. Marcus has been saving extra money. He has it all planned out. An apartment, a job lined up at a printing company. He says we'll be okay. I believe him. I have to believe him. August 16th. That was the only entry on the page. Just the date. But someone had gone back later and added 3 words in different ink. Letters shaky and barely legible. He's dead. There were no more entries after that. The rest of the notebook was blank. I set it aside and pulled out the next one. This notebook was newer, the pages cleaner. The handwriting had changed too. More controlled, but with a desperate edge to the letters. January 2007. Plan to bring Nora home. The pages that followed were filled with meticulous planning, budgets broken down to the penny, job schedules color-coded by day of the week, a timeline that stretched from 2007 to 2009. Goals. Finish GED. Done. June 2007. Get driver's license. Done. August 2007. Save $2,000 for lawyer fees. Save $1,500 for apartment deposit. Find stable job with benefits. Complete parenting classes required by court. Pass home inspection. The next pages showed budget calculations that made my throat tight. Monthly income. Diner. 30 hours times $8.50 equals $1,020. Cleaning job. 15 hours times $12 equals $720. Total, $1,740. Monthly expenses. Rent, shared room, equals $300. Food equals $150. Bus pass equals $60. Phone equals $40. Savings for lawyer equals $200. Savings for apartment equals $200. Emergency fund equals $100. She had been eating one meal a day to save money. She had been living in a shared room with strangers and taking 2 buses to get between her jobs. All so she could save $400 a month toward getting me back. The timeline at the bottom of the page showed her target date, August 2009. She would have enough money by then. She would file the petition. She would bring me home before I turned 4. But she died in January, 7 months before her own deadline. I kept flipping through the notebook. There were more budgets, lists of things she needed to buy, a crib, clothes, diapers. She had prices written next to each item, comparison shopping between stores. And tucked between the pages near the back, I found letters. Not mailed, just written and saved. My sweet baby, December 2007. I saw a toy truck at the store today, red and yellow. I almost bought it for you, but I put the money in the jar instead. Every dollar gets us closer. I'm working so hard, Nora. I'm so tired all the time. But I keep going because I promised myself I would bring you home. We're going to have a little apartment with a window that gets morning sun. I'll read to you every night. We'll go to the park on weekends. I'll teach you to braid lavender stems the way Grandma taught me. Just hold on a little longer. Mommy is coming. I promise. Dear Nora, November 2008. I'm enrolled in community college for next fall. 2 classes to start. I want to be able to help you with homework when you're older. I want to be the kind of mom who knows things. Mr. Patterson, the lawyer, says I have a strong case now. I've been stable for almost 2 years. 2 jobs. Parenting classes completed. I have references from my boss and my landlord. He thinks we can file in the spring. I'm so close, baby. So close I can almost feel you in my arms again. My dearest daughter, January 5th, 2009. I did it. I have the money. $2,000 saved. Tomorrow I'm meeting with Mr. Patterson to review everything one last time. Next Monday we file the petition. The social worker will come inspect my apartment. I cleaned it 3 times. I bought new sheets for your bed, pink with butterflies. I hope you like butterflies. I hope you like me. What if you don't remember me? What if you're scared? But Mr. Patterson says children are resilient. He says you'll adjust. He says in 6 months you could be home. 6 months. I can survive anything for 6 months. Hold on, sweet girl. Mommy is coming for real this time. I promise. I swear to God, I promise. The letter was dated January 5th. She died on January 10th, 5 days later. 5 days before she was supposed to file the paperwork that would have brought me home. The grief was so vast I couldn't contain it. It spilled out in sounds that didn't seem human, raw and ragged from somewhere deep in my chest. I had spent my whole life believing I wasn't wanted, and the truth was so much worse. I had been wanted desperately. I had been loved with the kind of fierce determination that sacrificed everything. And my mother had died 5 days before she could save me. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the light to change. Long enough for my eyes to go numb from crying. When I could finally breathe again, I sealed the boxes back up and went downstairs. I needed air. I needed to move. I needed to be anywhere except surrounded by evidence of love I would never get to return. I walked out to the lavender fields. The plants were overgrown and wild, some dead and woody, others still fighting to bloom. The scent rose up around me, sweet and sharp and complicated. Something about it felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain, like a memory that lived in my body instead of my mind. I was standing there trying to breathe through the grief when I heard another vehicle approaching. A different truck this time, newer, with tools visible in the bed. A young man climbed out, maybe 24, with dark hair that needed cutting and work-worn hands. He had his mother's practical build and the same assessing eyes. "You must be Nora. I'm Wyatt, Anna's son." His voice was quiet, economical with words. He moved toward the barn without waiting for a response, already evaluating what needed to be done. "Mom said the structure's not safe. I'll board up the opening so nothing gets in." He worked efficiently, measuring and cutting lumber with practiced ease. I watched for a while, then started helping where I could, holding boards steady while he hammered. We didn't talk much, but the silence felt comfortable rather than awkward. When he finished, the barn looked more secure even in its damaged state. "You planning to stay?" His question came without judgment, just curiosity. "I don't know yet." He nodded like that was a perfectly reasonable answer. "Well, if you need help with repairs, I do carpentry work. Mom has my number." He drove away, and I was alone again with the lavender and the letters, and the impossible weight of everything I had learned. I was standing there trying to breathe through the grief when I heard another vehicle approaching. This one I recognized immediately, the black Mercedes. Victor Brennan stepped out wearing a different suit, navy this time, but with the same aura of expensive menace. He wasn't alone. A man in his 30s climbed out of the passenger side, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than my entire foster care education. "Miss Hayes, I see you're still here. I was hoping you'd reconsidered my offer." "I told you I'm not selling." Victor smiled that thin predator smile. "I brought my attorney. Jonathan, show her the paperwork." The attorney opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. He held them out, but I didn't take them. "What is this?" "A lawsuit." Victor's voice was perfectly pleasant. "I'm suing for damages related to mineral rights access. You see, there was a verbal agreement between your grandfather and my company back in 2014. He agreed to allow survey teams on the property. When he reneged on that agreement, it cost us significant time and resources." "That's a lie." "Perhaps. Perhaps not. Either way, you'll need to hire an attorney to defend yourself. A good mining rights attorney costs about $400 an hour. This case will take at least a year to resolve. You'll be bankrupt long before we see a courtroom." The attorney set the papers on the porch railing and weighted them down with a rock. "You have 30 days to respond. After that, we'll file for default judgment and take the property anyway." Victor started to turn away, then paused. You know what's interesting? Your grandfather was a stubborn man too. Refused every reasonable offer. Refused to see logic. And look what happened. Stress from our negotiations. The legal fees. The constant pressure. Doctor said his heart just couldn't take it anymore. Died right in his own bed. Quite sad, really. The way he said it, so casual and unconcerned, made my blood run cold. Are you saying you killed him? Victor laughed. I'm saying stress is a killer, just like your mother. Working 2 jobs at 20 years old, barely sleeping, running herself into the ground. Then one night she's so exhausted she loses control of her vehicle on icy roads. Terrible tragedy. But sometimes people just push themselves too hard. He climbed back into his Mercedes. 24 hours, Miss Hayes. After that, things get much more difficult for you. They drove away and I stood there shaking with rage so intense my vision blurred at the edges. He had killed them. Maybe not directly, but he had orchestrated the circumstances that led to their deaths. The pressure on my grandparents, the stress that weakened my grandfather's heart, and my mother, working herself to exhaustion because she needed money for lawyers because my grandparents couldn't afford to fight Victor's legal battles and save for her petition at the same time. He had destroyed my entire family, and he was smiling about it. I went back inside and tore through the house looking for anything that might be evidence. There had to be something. Letters from Victor's company, court documents, anything. The master bedroom had a closet with built-in drawers. I pulled them all open. Socks, handkerchiefs, a jewelry box with a few pieces of costume jewelry. And at the very back, underneath a stack of sweaters, a small metal box. It was locked. I tried the brass keys from Harrison's ring, but they were too large. Then I remembered the small silver key. It slid in perfectly. Inside the box was a stack of photographs, some legal documents, and a cassette tape. The tape was labeled in my grandfather's handwriting. Victor Brennan, March 2015. I ran back downstairs and searched until I found an old cassette player in a drawer in the living room. The batteries were dead, but I found an adapter and plugged it in. I slid the tape in and pressed play. The sound quality was poor, recorded on a cheap device, but the voices came through clearly enough. The first voice was older, rougher. My grandfather. This is Thomas Hayes, March 27, 2015. Recording a conversation with Victor Brennan of Brennan Mining and Development for my own records. Then Victor's voice, younger than it was now, but just as smooth. Mr. Hayes, I appreciate you seeing me. I know we've had our disagreements in the past, but I'm hoping we can come to an understanding. I've told you no a dozen times, Victor. The answer isn't going to change. You're being unreasonable. The geological surveys prove there are significant mineral deposits under your land. Commercially viable lithium. You could be wealthy beyond anything you've imagined.
I don't care about wealth.
This land has been in my family for 40 years. It's not for sale. There was a pause on the tape. Then Victor's voice came back, harder. You should care, because I've bought every other property in this area except yours. You're surrounded. And I have very deep pockets and very patient lawyers. I can make your life extremely difficult. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining reality. You're what, 73? Your wife is 72 with a heart condition. You think you can afford to fight me in court? You think you can handle the stress? I've already filed 3 nuisance suits against neighboring properties. The legal fees bankrupted 2 of them. The third one, old man Anderson, his heart gave out before we even made it to trial. Stress is a killer, Mr. Hayes. My grandfather's voice shook with suppressed rage. You're admitting you harassed these people to death?
I'm saying accidents happen.
especially to stubborn old farmers who refuse to see reason. 3 of your neighbors have died in the last 2 years. Barn fires, equipment malfunctions. These things happen on farms. Very sad, but not unexpected. Get off my property. You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, I start filing lawsuits. And trust me, Mr. Hayes, I will bury you in legal fees until you have nothing left. The tape ended. I sat there staring at the cassette player. My grandfather had recorded Victor essentially admitting to harassment, to intentionally causing stress-related deaths, to threatening my grandparents. It wasn't a full confession to murder, but it was damning enough. And if Victor had been willing to say that much on a recording he didn't know existed, what had he done when there were no witnesses? I needed to take this to someone, but Anna's warning echoed in my head. Don't trust the local police. Sheriff Thompson worked for Victor. I found my phone and searched for FBI, Field Office, Helena, Montana. The number came up and I dialed before I could second-guess myself. FBI, Helena Field Office. I need to report threats and possible homicides related to a mining company in Ridgeview. There was a pause. Ma'am, I'm going to transfer you to one of our agents. Please hold. The hold music played for 30 seconds before a woman's voice came on the line. This is Special Agent Catherine Blake. How can I help you? My name is Nora Hayes. I just inherited property in Ridgeview, and the owner of Brennan Mining and Development has been threatening me. I also have evidence he may have been involved in several deaths in the area. Her tone sharpened immediately. What kind of evidence? A cassette tape. My grandfather recorded a conversation with Victor Brennan in 2015, where Brennan talks about harassing neighbors to death and threatens my grandfather with the same. We've been investigating Brennan Mining for 2 years. Can you bring the tape to Helena? I can do better than that. I'm taking it to Portland. I need to check something at the Department of Social Services anyway. I can meet you wherever you want. We scheduled a meeting for the next day. She gave me the address of a field office in Portland and warned me to be careful, to not confront Victor again, to keep doors locked and stay where there were witnesses. I hung up and looked around the farmhouse. Every surface was covered in dust. Every room was filled with ghosts. I couldn't stay here tonight, not alone, not knowing Victor might come back. I grabbed my duffel bag and the cassette tape and walked out to the road. It took 20 minutes of walking before a pickup truck stopped to give me a ride into town. The driver dropped me at the only motel, a rundown place called the Silver Spur with 12 rooms and a vacancy sign that flickered. I paid cash for one night.
$63.
The room smelled like cigarettes and industrial cleaner, but it had a lock on the door, and I was too exhausted to care. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow I would drive to Portland. I would meet with the FBI. I would go to the Department of Social Services and demand answers about why 247 letters never reached me. But tonight I just needed to stop moving, stop thinking, stop feeling the crushing weight of all the love I had lost before I ever knew I had it. I fell asleep with the cassette tape clutched in my hand. The drive to Portland took 7 hours. I rented the cheapest car I could find, a beat-up Honda with a check engine light that never turned off. The roads unwound behind me, Montana giving way to Idaho, giving way to Oregon. And I used the time to think. The Department of Social Services building looked exactly the same as when I had left it 3 days earlier. The same fluorescent lights, the same smell of disinfectant and despair. But I walked in differently this time. Not as someone leaving the system, but as someone demanding accountability from it. I asked for a supervisor. The receptionist tried to brush me off, but I planted myself in a chair and said I would wait as long as it took. 40 minutes later,
A woman in her mid-50s came out to meet me. "I'm Linda Morrison, Deputy Director. I understand you have concerns?" "I have questions. I'm Nora Hayes. Case number 37421B. I aged out 3 days ago. I just found out I had grandparents who had been trying to contact me for 16 years. They sent 247 letters, and every single one was returned as undeliverable. I want to know why." Linda Morrison's face went pale. "Can you come to my office?" I followed her down a hallway to a small office with a window that looked out over the parking lot. She gestured for me to sit and then pulled up something on her computer.
Case number 37421B. Nora Hayes. Entered system October 2006 at age 2 months. 8 placements over 18 years. She scrolled through screens, her frown deepening. This is a system failure. Multiple failures. You were initially placed with contact information listing Grace Hayes as next of kin and emergency contact. But when you were moved to your second placement in 2008, the new caseworker created a fresh file and marked you as having no known relatives. The original file was archived and apparently no one cross-referenced it. So the letters were sent to the main office, but no one knew which case to attach them to. Linda nodded slowly. Without your case number or specific placement address, they would have been returned by our mailroom. The staff there processes hundreds of pieces of mail a day. If something doesn't have clear routing information, it goes back. And phone calls? She clicked through more screens. There are notes here. Starting in 2007, Grace Hayes called annually, requesting information about your placement and visitation rights. Each time, the intake specialist noted that the case was closed and no information could be released to non-custodial parties without a court order. Did anyone ever tell the person taking those calls that Grace Hayes was listed as next of kin in the original file? Linda's silence was answer enough. "This is unconscionable. I'm so sorry. If there's anything we can do to help you now..." "You can't. They're both dead. My grandmother died in 2022, still not knowing if I hated her. My grandfather died in 2020, believing I had forgotten him. And I spent 18 years thinking I was unwanted, when the truth is, they loved me enough to call every single year for 16 years. And you people couldn't be bothered to check your own records." I stood up. "I'm meeting with the FBI in an hour. I'm going to make sure they know how your negligence contributed to the harassment and death of 2 elderly people. And I'm going to make damn sure every news outlet in Oregon knows that your incompetence kept a child away from loving family for nearly 2 decades. Linda Morrison opened her mouth, but I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I walked out of that building for the second time in 3 days, and this time, I knew I would never go back. The FBI field office was in a nondescript building downtown. Agent Catherine Blake met me in the lobby. She was in her early 40s with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and the kind of steady gaze that suggested she didn't miss much. We went to a conference room and I played the cassette tape. She listened without interrupting, taking notes on a legal pad. When it finished, she looked up. "This is good. It's not a confession to murder, but it establishes pattern and intent. Combined with our existing investigation, this could be enough for a warrant." She explained that they had been building a case against Brennan Mining for 2 years, investigating connections between Victor Brennan and the deaths of 4 property owners who had refused to sell. But they needed concrete evidence linking him to the incidents. "Can you get me copies of any other documents your grandfather kept? Court filings, letters from Brennan's company, anything that shows a pattern of harassment?" "Everything is at the farmhouse." "Then we need to get it before Brennan realizes what you have." The drive back to Montana felt longer than the drive out. Agent Blake had given me her card and instructions to photograph any documents I found and email them immediately.
She had also warned me that Victor was dangerous, that people who threatened the way he did were capable of following through. I arrived back at Lavender Ridge Farm just as the sun was setting.
The house looked different in the fading light, less abandoned and more like it was waiting. I parked the rental car and walked toward the porch. I smelled the smoke before I saw it. Black smoke billowing from the barn behind the house, thick and oily. Flames already climbing the walls, orange and yellow against the darkening sky. I ran toward it, but the heat drove me back before I got within 20 feet. The barn was fully engulfed. There was nothing I could do except call 911. The fire department arrived 20 minutes later, but by then, the structure was beyond saving. They focused on keeping the flames from spreading to the house. I stood in the yard watching my grandfather's barn burn and trying not to think about what had been stored inside. Tools, equipment, possibly more documents. The fire chief found me after they had gotten the blaze contained. Any idea how it started? I was in Portland all day. It was fine when I left this morning. He showed me something he had found near the barn door. A glass bottle with a rag stuffed in the neck. The rag was charred but recognizable. Molotov cocktail. This was arson. The sheriff arrived 20 minutes after that. Sheriff Thompson was exactly what I expected. Late 50s, substantial belly hanging over his belt, eyes that calculated angles before speaking. "Miss Hayes, I hear someone tried to burn down your barn. They succeeded. Any enemies? Anyone with reason to want to hurt you?" I looked at him and thought about Anna's warning. Sheriff Thompson has been in Victor's pocket for years. Can't think of anyone? He made notes that I doubted would lead anywhere. "Well, I'll file a report. In the meantime, might be smart to get better insurance on this property. Old farms like this, they burn down all the time." After he left, I found a piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of my rental car. The handwriting was typed, probably from a computer. Last warning. You have 24 hours to sign the sale agreement, or the next fire will be the house, with you in it. I took a photo of the note and emailed it to Agent Blake with a message. He just tried to burn me out. Her response came back in under a minute. "Get somewhere safe, now. Don't stay at the farm tonight." But I didn't leave. I sat on the porch steps watching the smoldering ruins of the barn and thinking about my grandmother planting lavender bushes every year. 12 bushes, one for every year I was gone. They had waited 14 years. They had loved me through rejection and silence and returned letters. They had stood at the end of driveways watching for cars that never came. And Victor Brennan had systematically destroyed them. I was done running. I was done being afraid. Tomorrow I would find every piece of evidence in this house, and I would make sure Victor Brennan answered for what he had done. But tonight, I just sat there, in the smell of smoke and lavender, and let myself finally, fully grieve for the family I never got to know. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't risk it with Victor's threat hanging over the house like the smell of burned wood. So when Anna's truck pulled up at dawn, engine cutting through the morning silence, I was still on the porch where I had been sitting for hours. Wyatt climbed out of the passenger side before Anna even shut off the engine. He took one look at the blackened remains of the barn and his jaw tightened, but he didn't waste time with questions, just went straight to his truck bed and started unloading lumber. Anna sat down on the steps next to me. "FBI coming?" "This afternoon. Agent Blake wants me to wear a wire and get Victor to confess on tape." "You going to do it?" "I don't know. He already threatened to burn the house, if he figures out what I'm doing." Anna cut me off with a sharp look. "Your grandmother didn't raise a coward." "Well, she didn't raise you at all. But if she had, she wouldn't have raised a coward. You going to let him win because you're scared? The words hit like a slap, but I needed them. I had spent 18 years being afraid. Afraid of foster parents who drank, afraid of group home bullies, afraid of speaking up and getting moved to somewhere worse. Fear had kept me small and silent, and I was done with it. No, I'm not letting him win. Good. Then you do whatever the FBI needs, and Wyatt and I will make sure this place is still standing when you get back. Agent Catherine Blake arrived at 2 in the afternoon driving an unmarked sedan. She brought another agent with her, a man in his 30s who introduced himself as Agent Rodriguez from the White Collar Crime Division. They set up equipment on the kitchen table. The wire was smaller than I expected, barely the size of a button, with an adhesive backing that would stick to my skin under my shirt. The plan is simple. Catherine's voice was calm and professional. You call Victor and tell him you're ready to negotiate. Meet him somewhere public, a diner or coffee shop, somewhere with witnesses, but where you can talk privately enough for him to be candid. What if he doesn't say anything incriminating? Then we keep investigating the old-fashioned way. But men like Victor Brennan, they like to gloat. They like to tell you how smart they are, how they outmaneuvered everyone. Give him the opportunity and he'll talk. Rodriguez showed me how to adjust the wire if it shifted, how to subtly check that it was still recording. They would be in a van parked nearby, listening to everything. If at any point you feel unsafe, you say the phrase, "We need to reschedule." That's our signal to come in immediately. I practiced the phrase 3 times until it felt natural. Then I called Victor's office number. His secretary answered and put me through without hesitation. Miss Hayes, I was wondering if you'd come to your senses. I want to negotiate, but I need better terms than 200,000. Smart girl. Where do you want to meet? There's a diner in Ridgeview, Betty's place, 4 o'clock. I'll be there. The diner was exactly the kind of place you'd expect in a town of 1,100 people. Vinyl booths patched with duct tape, a counter with stools that swiveled, and the smell of coffee that had been sitting on the burner too long. Only 3 other customers occupied the space, all of them locals who knew better than to pay obvious attention to other people's business. Victor arrived exactly on time. He slid into the booth across from me wearing another expensive suit, this one charcoal gray with a blue tie that probably cost more than everything I owned. I ordered coffee I didn't plan to drink. Victor ordered nothing. So, you're ready to be reasonable. I'm ready to discuss terms. 200,000 isn't enough. The land is worth more, and we both know it. He leaned back, studying me with the kind of assessment you'd give a horse you were thinking of buying. You're right. It is worth more. But you don't have the leverage to demand market value. You're 18 years old with no resources, and I have an army of lawyers who can tie you up in court for the next decade. Then why not just wait me out? Because I'm tired of waiting. I've been trying to buy this land for 15 years. Your grandparents were stubborn, and it cost them everything. I'd prefer not to go through that again. The opening was there. I pushed. What did it cost them? Victor smiled, and something cold moved behind his eyes. Everything. Thomas Hayes had a weak heart. The stress of fighting me, the legal fees, the constant pressure. His doctor told him to reduce stress, but he wouldn't listen, just kept fighting and fighting, until his heart gave out right there in his own bedroom. Natural causes, officially. But we both know what really killed him. My hands tightened around the coffee cup. And my grandmother? Victor shrugged. Grace lasted longer than I expected. 2 more years of trying to keep the farm running alone. But she was already sick. Heart condition, same as her husband. Amazing how genetic these things are, and how much harder they get when you're stressed and isolated and losing everything. You're saying you killed them. I'm saying I created circumstances that made their deaths inevitable. There's a difference, legally speaking. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a document. But you're smarter than they were. You understand business, so here's my final offer. $500,000. More than fair for a property this size in this market. You sign, you walk away wealthy, and you never have to think about this place again. What about my mother? The question came out before I could stop it. It wasn't part of the script. Agent Blake had told me to focus on the grandparents, on getting Victor to admit to harassing them. But I needed to know. Victor's expression shifted into something that might have been sympathy if it wasn't so calculated. Lily was a tragedy, beautiful girl, but she made bad choices. Got pregnant at 16 with my brother's baby. Marcus was always irresponsible like that. After he died, she had every opportunity to give the baby up properly, to move on with her life. Instead, she spent 3 years working herself to death trying to save enough money to fight a custody battle she was never going to win. You made sure she couldn't win. Victor tilted his head. I made sure your grandparents were too busy fighting my lawsuits to help her financially. I made sure they were stressed enough, broke enough, desperate enough, that they couldn't afford lawyers for both their own defense and her custody petition. If Lily had been smart, she would have accepted that you were better off in the system and moved on. But she wasn't smart. She was stubborn like her parents. And stubbornness kills. My throat was so tight I could barely breathe. She died 5 days before she was going to file. 5 days. Bad timing. Or good timing, depending on your perspective. If she had filed that petition, it would have tied up the property and custody litigation for years. Her death simplified things considerably. You're admitting you killed 4 people to get this land. Victor laughed, actually laughed, like I had said something genuinely amusing. I'm admitting I'm good at business. I identify obstacles and I remove them. Your grandfather's heart condition was an obstacle. I removed it by applying pressure until his body gave out. Your grandmother's stubbornness was an obstacle. I removed it the same way. Your mother's determination to regain custody was an obstacle. So I made sure she was too exhausted to drive safely. And now you're an obstacle. The question is, are you a smart obstacle who takes my money? Or a stubborn obstacle who ends up like the rest of your family? He slid the contract across the table. You have 60 seconds to decide. I looked down at the document. $500,000. More money than I had ever imagined having. Enough to start a new life anywhere I wanted. All I had to do was walk away from 247 letters and the memory of people who had loved me. I looked up at Victor. I'm a stubborn obstacle. His smile disappeared. That's unfortunate. Catherine Blake's voice came through the diner's front door before Victor could say anything else. Victor Brennan, FBI. You're under arrest. 3 agents moved in from different directions. Rodriguez came through the kitchen, Catherine through the front. A 3rd agent I hadn't seen blocked the back exit. They had their badges out, their hands near their weapons, but not drawn. Victor's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, calculation, and finally resignation. On what charges? Conspiracy to commit murder, extortion, racketeering? We have enough to start with, and I suspect we'll find more. They cuffed him right there in the booth. The other customers watched in silence. One elderly man at the counter raised his coffee cup in a small salute as they led Victor past. Catherine came over to my booth while Rodriguez read Victor his rights. You did good. We got everything we need. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the table to steady them. He killed them. All of them. And he smiled about it.
I know, and now he's going to answer for it. They took Victor to Helena that night. Catherine explained that they would hold him there while they built the full case.
She had been investigating Brennan mining for 2 years, and this confession was the break they needed. There were other victims, other families who had lost property or loved ones to Victor's methods. You'll need to testify eventually, but that won't be for months. In the meantime, you should think about getting a lawyer to handle your own legal situation. Victor filed that lawsuit before we arrested him, and it's still active until a judge dismisses it. I'll figure it out. Catherine handed me her card again, even though I already had one. Call me if you need anything. You were brave today. Your grandparents would be proud. After they left, I sat in that diner booth and let the reality settle in. Victor Brennan was in custody. The man who had destroyed my family was going to face justice. It should have felt like victory, but all I felt was hollow. Anna was waiting at the farmhouse when I got back. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. I hadn't been hugged in so long, I almost forgot how to respond. But I let her hold me while I cried for the 4th or 5th or 100th time since arriving at this place. You got him. I got him. Good. Grace can rest now. Wyatt had finished boarding up what remained of the barn and was working on replacing some rotted boards on the front porch. He worked quietly, giving me space but staying close enough that I didn't feel alone. That night I finally slept in my grandmother's bed. I found clean sheets in the linen closet and made the bed properly. The mattress was softer than anything I had slept on in years, and the room smelled like lavender and cedar from the sachets Grace had tucked in the drawers. I slept without dreaming and woke to sunlight streaming through lace curtains. The next morning I drove to the Ridgeview Cemetery. I had asked Anna for directions the night before, and she had drawn me a map on the back of a receipt. The cemetery was small, maybe 200 graves, on a hillside overlooking the valley. Most of the headstones were old, weathered granite with names and dates worn nearly smooth. I found them in the newer section, a double plot with a single stone. Thomas Michael Hayes, 1947 to 2020. Grace Eleanor Hayes, 1947 to 2022. Together forever. Someone had been tending the grave. Fresh flowers sat in a built-in vase, wildflowers that looked like they had been picked from the roadside. I wondered if it was Anna or one of the other neighbors who remembered them. I knelt on the grass between their graves and didn't know what to say. Every word felt inadequate. Every apology felt too small for the magnitude of what had been lost. I'm sorry I wasn't here. I'm sorry you died waiting. I'm sorry I spent my whole life angry at you when you were fighting for me all along. The words came out in pieces, broken and halting. I found the letters, all 247 of them. I know you never stopped trying. I know you called every year. I know Grandpa stood at the end of the driveway watching for me, and I hate that he died before I could tell him I was coming home. The wind moved through the grass, carrying the scent of sage and distant rain. A voice spoke behind me. They loved you more than anything. I turned to see an older man, maybe 70, wearing a clerical collar under a worn cardigan. He had kind eyes and the gentle bearing of someone used to comforting the grieving. Pastor Michael. I presided over both their funerals. Nora Hayes. I know. You look just like Grace. Same eyes. He came to stand beside me, looking down at the grave. Your grandfather was a good man. Stubborn as they come, but good. He never missed a Sunday service in the 40 years I knew him. And every Sunday after you left, he would light a candle for you and ask me to pray for your safe return. Every Sunday? Every single one. From October 2006 until COVID shut down in-person services in March 2020, By then, he was too sick to come anyway. But he called me every Sunday until he died and asked me to light the candle for him. My vision blurred. Your grandmother was the same. After Thomas passed, she would come alone, sit in the back pew, light her candle, and then afterward she'd ask me if I thought God was listening, if I thought her prayers would reach you wherever you were. What did you tell her? That faith means believing even when you can't see proof, that love crosses any distance if you hold on to it hard enough. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. I found this in your grandmother's purse after the funeral. 18 birthday cards, one for every year of your life. She carried them with her everywhere. I think she wanted to be ready in case she ever got the chance to give them to you in person. He handed me the envelope. Inside were the cards, still in their original packaging from the drugstore. Cartoon animals and flowers and generic birthday wishes. None of them had been written in yet, as if she had been saving that moment for when we were together. I clutched them against my chest. Thank you. You're welcome. And Nora, if you don't mind my saying, I think the best way to honor their memory is to do exactly what you're doing. Stay here. Make this place live again. They waited so long for you to come home. Don't leave now that you finally have. 6 months after Victor's arrest, winter came to Montana with the kind of cold that froze breath in midair. But inside Lavender Ridge Farm, the house was warm. Wyatt had spent the fall helping me with repairs. The roof was fixed, the windows sealed, the porch no longer sagged, and the paint looked fresh where we had patched the worst spots. It wasn't perfect, but it was becoming home. The lavender fields showed signs of recovery. We had cut back the dead wood, and the plants were preparing for winter dormancy. Come spring, they would bloom again. Anna had taught me how to care for them, when to prune and when to leave them alone. Victor's plea deal had come through in September. Life without parole. He would die in prison, and I would never have to see him again. Sheriff Thompson had been arrested. The corrupt judge was under investigation. The whole network was unraveling. Catherine called every few weeks with updates, but mostly she just checked to see how I was doing, making sure I knew I wasn't alone. The FBI case had expanded. They found evidence of 6 deaths connected to Victor's business practices over 12 years, other families who had lost loved ones, other properties that had been stolen through intimidation and violence. Justice didn't bring anyone back, but it meant no one else would lose their grandparents to Victor Brennan's greed. December brought the first real snow, and with it, the Harvest Festival. Anna had convinced me to participate even though I barely had anything to sell. You've got lavender. You've got your grandmother's sachets. People want to meet you. I spent a week preparing. I made bundles from the dried stems we had harvested in late summer. I sewed sachets using fabric from Grace's sewing room and filled them with dried lavender buds. I even managed to distill a small batch of essential oil using the old copper still we found in the barn ruins. The booth was simple. A folding table, a hand-painted sign that read Lavender Ridge Farm. 20 bundles of dried lavender, 30 sachets, 3 small bottles of oil. The festival was held in the town square, a weekend market with local vendors. Maybe 500 people cycled through over the course of the day. They bought my lavender, but mostly they came to tell stories. Your grandfather fixed my truck once. Wouldn't take payment. Your grandmother taught my daughter to sew. Most patient woman I ever knew. Lily was kind to everyone, even people who weren't kind back. And then, late in the afternoon, an elderly man stopped at my booth. He leaned heavily on a wooden cane and looked at me for a long moment before speaking. I'm Samuel Higgins. Used to live down the road before arthritis forced me into town. Anna mentioned you. He nodded slowly. I used to see Thomas every evening, around 5 o'clock. He'd walk down to the end of your driveway and just stand there, watching the road. I asked him once what he was doing, and he said he was waiting for his granddaughter to come home. My breath caught. Every single day, for 14 years, rain, snow, summer heat, didn't matter. He'd stand there from 5 to 6 and just watch. Sometimes Grace would come get him for dinner, and he'd say, "Just 5 more minutes. What if today's the day? What if I go inside and miss her?"
Samuel reached out and patted my hand where it rested on the table.
When Thomas died, I went to check on Grace. She was standing at that spot, same place Thomas always stood. She said someone needed to keep watching. Someone needed to be there when you came home. I had to look away, blinking hard. He'd be so proud, seeing you here, seeing this place coming back to life. He'd be mighty proud. After Samuel left, I had to step away from the booth. Wyatt covered for me without comment, his quiet presence understanding without needing explanation. By the end of the day, I had sold everything, made $340. It wasn't much, but it was proof that this place could survive, that I could make something of what they had left me. That evening, as the sun set and the vendors packed up, I stood at the end of the driveway, the spot where my grandfather had waited for 14 years. The lavender fields stretched out behind me, dormant now, but alive.
The house stood solid against the winter sky, lights glowing warm in the windows.
Wyatt's truck was parked in the yard. Anna was inside making dinner, filling the kitchen with the smell of her chicken casserole. This was the place my grandfather had stood, day after day, year after year, watching for headlights that would signal my return. "I'm here, Grandpa. I'm home. I'm finally home." The wind carried my words away across the fields, but I like to think they reached him somehow. I turned and walked back to the house. Wyatt met me on the porch, a question in his eyes that he didn't voice, but I saw it there. The possibility of something more, something we were both too careful to name yet. Anna called us in for dinner. We sat around the kitchen table, the three of us, and for the first time since I was 2 months old, I ate a meal with people who felt like family. After dinner, I went to the room that had been Lily's.
I sat on the bed and opened the envelope Pastor Michael had given me.
18 birthday cards, blank and waiting. I took a pen and started writing. One card for every year I had been gone. One message for every birthday they had missed. Dear Grandma and Grandpa, I got your letters, all 247 of them. I'm sorry it took me so long to come home. But I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. I wrote until my hand cramped and my eyes burned. And when I was done, I took all 18 cards to the cemetery the next morning and left them on their grave. For every year you waited, for every candle you lit, for every time you stood at the end of the driveway watching for me. I'm home, and I'm staying. The spring came early that year. By March, the lavender was already showing new growth, bright green shoots pushing up through the old wood we had cut back. The fields that had looked dead just months before were coming back to life. Wyatt came by most days now,
Sometimes to help with repairs. Sometimes just to sit on the porch and watch the sunset.
The silences between us were comfortable, filled with understanding rather than emptiness. Anna told me one evening, over coffee on that same porch, that her son had never been one for talking much. But when he cared about something, he showed it through action. I looked at the new porch boards he had laid, the windows he had sealed, the garden beds he had helped me build. I know, Anna smiled.
Grace would have liked him for you. She always said the quiet ones were the ones worth keeping. In April, I planted new lavender. 2 full acres of small starts that would take 2 years to mature, but represented the future of this place. I hired 2 workers from town to help, and Anna's nephew came out to install a proper irrigation system. The house no longer felt like a museum. It felt lived in. I cooked in Grace's kitchen. I read Thomas's books. I played his violin. Badly, but with determination.
And every evening at 5 o'clock, I walked to the end of the driveway. Not to wait, but to remember. To honor the grandfather who had stood in this exact spot for 14 years, believing I would come home. By summer, the original lavender was blooming. Not the wild profusion it must have been in the farm's glory days, but enough to fill the air with that sweet, complicated scent that triggered memories I couldn't quite grasp but somehow knew in my bones. One evening in July, Wyatt and I sat on the porch watching the purple waves of flowers move in the wind. He reached over and took my hand. Didn't say anything, just held it. And I let him, because I was learning what it meant to let people close, to trust that they wouldn't leave, to believe that I deserved to be loved. In November, on the anniversary of Grace's death, I baked a cake using one of her recipe cards. Chocolate with lavender frosting. I brought it to the cemetery and left a slice on her grave. Happy birthday, Grandma. The farm is alive again. The lavender is blooming, and I'm not alone anymore. I told them about Wyatt, about Anna, about the town that had welcomed me once they understood I wasn't selling to developers, about the life I was building on the foundation they had left. On New Year's Eve, as the year turned, I stood at the end of the driveway one more time. The stars wheeled overhead, bright and sharp in the winter cold. The house glowed behind me, every window lit. I could almost feel my grandfather standing beside me, could almost hear my grandmother calling us in from the cold, could almost catch the scent of my mother's perfume on the wind. They were gone, but they weren't forgotten. Every lavender plant was a prayer. Every letter I had saved was a conversation. Every day I chose to stay was proof that their love had not been wasted. I had spent 18 years believing I was nobody, a girl thrown away by people who didn't want her. But the truth was so much more complicated and so much more beautiful. I was Nora Rose Hayes, granddaughter of Thomas and Grace, daughter of Lily and Marcus, keeper of Lavender Ridge Farm, the girl who came home. And I was wanted. I had always been wanted, even when I didn't know it, even when the distance seemed insurmountable, even when the letters came back unread and the phone calls went unanswered. Love had crossed 18 years and 247 letters. Love had survived a broken system and a cruel man, and time that could never be recovered. Love had waited at the end of a driveway for 14 years, believing in a return that seemed impossible. And love had brought me home. I turned and walked back to the house. Wyatt was waiting on the porch, his quiet presence a promise of tomorrow. Anna's truck pulled up the driveway, headlights cutting through the dark because she never let me spend New Year's Eve alone. The lights were on. The fire was burning in the stone fireplace. The smell of lavender and cedar filled the air. This was home. Not because of the land or the house or even the flowers, but because this was where I was loved. And love was the only thing that ever really made you belong anywhere.